in January of 1991, a trapper named Emil Barrow went out to work the far end of a family trap line in the Nisutlin River country of the southern Yukon and did not come back. He was 52 years old. He had run that line most of his life. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police out of Ross River searched for 6 days and recorded the case as a man lost to deep winter, presumed dead. Body not recovered. That is what the file says. The file does not say what his older brother saw 8 days later at the edge of the home clearing. It does not say why the family buried a closed coffin that spring, or why the surviving brother never trapped that country again. For 35 years he told no one. Late last year, he set down an account of it in his own hand, and it passed to the family after his death this past October. What follows is that account. In his words, names have been kept as he wrote them. I am the older brother. My name does not matter much now. Emil was the younger one, and he is the reason I am telling this. Before I tell you how he died, I have to tell you what lived behind our home, because you will not understand the one without the other. There was a Sasquatch in the country back of our cabin. I will say the word plainly. I never once said it out loud to a living soul before now. It stood over 7 feet. It was more like an old drawing of a Neanderthal than any ape. Heavy bone over the eyes, broad flat nose, a wide human sort of face with no muzzle at all. Its hair went rust brown at the body and charcoal at the tips. The skin of its face was weathered gray-brown, like a man who has worked 40 winters outdoors. Its left ear had a notch torn out of the top edge. An old wound healed clean. That notch is how I knew, across 30 years, that I was always looking at the same one. Our family came to that valley in my grandfather's time. We had run lines farther south and lost them, the way families did. My grandfather brought what was left of us north to a watershed nobody wanted. Hard to reach, harder to leave. He cut the first line through the spruce himself, and in the first winter he learned the country was already spoken for. The catch kept vanishing. He would walk his line and find the sets sprung and the animals gone. Not fed on where they lay, the way a lynx leaves a kill. Gone. Lifted clean out of the country. He was not a stupid man. He worked out that something was taking a share and that he could fight a thing he had never seen, or he could pay it. He paid it. He started leaving a portion at the far end of the line. A marten, a hare, whatever the day gave, set on a flat stone where the line met the creek. And the taking stopped. The rest of his catch came home with him after that, every winter, for the rest of his life. He never called it a friend. He never called it anything, except once, to my father, when he was dying, he said the country had a keeper. He said the keeper could be dealt with fair, and that the man who dealt fair would be dealt fair back. Then he told my father where the stone was. My father kept the arrangement the way you keep a roof, because it worked, and because his father told him to. He was not a man given to wonder. I asked him once, when I was small, why we left good meat out at the creek when we could sell it. He looked at me a while. He said some rent you pay whether you can see the landlord or not. I did not understand him then, I do now. The rules were simple and were never written down. You left the share at the stone. You left it at dusk. You did not follow whatever came for it. You did not go to the far end of the line after dark. And you did not, ever, bring the dealings of the country back across the threshold of the home. The woods were the woods. The house was the house. The keeper of the one had no business in the other. Hold on to that last rule. It is the one that matters. I saw it first when I was 9. Late fall, the light already going by 4. I had followed my father down the line against his word, the way a foolish boy does. He went ahead to the creek with the day's share. I hung back at a bend where the spruce opened up, and I watched. He set the meat on the stone and turned and walked back without looking behind him. Like a man leaving a church altar. After he passed me and went on up the trail, I stayed. I wanted to see. The trees across the creek moved with no wind in them. A shape came out that I took for a bear standing up. Then I understood it was not a bear. A bear does not have shoulders like that. A bear does not walk upright and easy and unhurried like a man crossing his own yard. It went to the stone. It crouched. It took what was there. And before it turned to go, it looked straight up the trail to the bend where I was hidden. And I saw its face. And I saw the notch torn out of its left ear. It knew I was there. It had known the whole time. It let me see it, and then it left. I told no one. That was the first secret, and it taught me how to keep the rest. I want to tell you about the good years, because there were many, And if I only tell you the end, you will think this was a story of fear. For most of my life, it was the opposite of fear. There was the winter of 1958, when my father was still on the line, and I was a young man working it beside him. That was the winter my father got hurt. A widowmaker came down off a spruce he was limbing, a heavy dead branch loosed by the wind, and it caught him across the back and put him down in the snow, a long way from the cabin, with a leg that would not take his weight. I was at the near end when it happened. He was alone at the far end, past the creek, in the country that was the keeper's. By all rights, he should have died out there. A man down and alone in that cold does not last the night, but he did not die, he told me after. And my father was not a man who told stories, that as the light went and the cold came into him and he made his peace with it, he heard something moving in the timber, and he was too far gone to be afraid, and a great shape came and stood over him in the dark. It did not touch him, it only stood, all night, between him and the wind, the way the tracks would stand around his granddaughter, 10 years later. And in the grey morning, when I came up the line, half mad with looking, I found him alive, banked around with broken spruce boughs that had not fallen there by any wind, sheltered, kept, and the great tracks in the snow all around him. My father never once in his life used the word Sasquatch, but he left the share at the stone with his own hands until those hands could not do it anymore, and the winter he died, he made me swear on it. Now you know why. It had kept him alive in the snow when he was young, the way it would keep his granddaughter, the way it would, at the very end, do the last thing it ever did for us. It had been keeping this family alive for longer than I knew. I was only ever paying back a debt that started before I was born. There was the winter of 1961. The trapping was the best the family ever had, every set full. The shed hung so thick my mother said we would want for nothing till spring. That was the winter I found the first thing left in return. I had gone to the creek alone, breaking the old rule. On the flat stone where our meat should have been there was a knot of grass instead, woven tight and careful, the way you would braid a child's hair. Dry and golden and deliberate. It was no accident of the wind. Something with hands had made it and set it there for us to find. I carried it home in my coat. I told no one. I kept it in a tobacco tin for 60 years. It sits on the shelf above me as I write this. There was the winter of 1964. That was the winter of the axe. I had been limbing deadfall along the near end of the line in the fall, and I set my axe against a stump to eat my lunch, and I walked off and left it. A good axe, a Hudson Bay pattern with a hickory haft. My father had hung himself. I did not miss it till I was home, and by then the snow had come, and I gave it up the way you give up anything the country swallows. In February, I went to leave the share, and the axe was leaned against the stone, standing upright. The haft driven a hand deep into the frozen ground so it would not fall, the head wiped clean of rust. I had left that axe a mile and a half up the line from the creek, in the other direction entirely. Something had found it where it lay in the deep snow and carried it to the one place it knew we came, and stood it up where we could not miss it. I want you to understand what that meant to me, standing there in the cold with my own axe in my hands. It was not just that the keeper gave things back. A magpie will carry off a bright thing and drop it somewhere. This was different. This was a mind that had watched us long enough to know that the stone at the creek was our post office, that whatever it left there, we would find. It had learned the shape of how we lived. It was answering us in a language it had worked out on its own, by watching, the way you learn the habits of a neighbor you never speak to. I took the axe home and I hung it back on its pegs, and I used it another 30 years. I never told my father where it had been, but I left extra at the stone that dusk, and I stood a while in the trees after, in case. Nothing came while I watched. It never did while I watched. That was part of the arrangement too, though no one ever said it. You did not get to see, you only got to know. There was the winter of 1968. My brother's girl wandered off the trail in a whiteout and was gone 6 hours. We thought we had lost her. We searched till full dark with lanterns, calling into snow so thick it ate the sound. We found her at the very edge of the tree line behind the house, sitting in a hollow at the base of a great spruce, out of the wind, wrapped in her own coat, half asleep, not a mark on her. She was 4 years old. She could not have walked there. All around that hollow, the snow was pressed with tracks far too large for any man, circling, a whole wall of them, as if something had walked a slow ring around that child the entire night to keep the cold and the dark off her. Emil saw those tracks and went grey in the face and never spoke of them once, but he left double at the stone the rest of that winter. There was the winter of 1971. That was the winter of the wolves. A pack had come into our country that year, more of them than anyone could remember, driven down by a hard season farther north. They took 2 of our dogs in November, right off the chain in the yard, and they got bold the way wolves get when they are hungry and there are enough of them to be brave. My father was old by then, and I had a young family in the cabin, and I was afraid. In the plain way, a man is afraid for the people he is responsible for. One night in the deep of that winter, the pack came into the yard itself. I heard the dogs that were left go wild, and I heard the wolves answer, close, right up against the buildings. And I got the rifle down, and I stood at the window, and I could see them moving in the snowlight, grey shapes, more than I could count. And then I heard something else, a sound I had heard only once before. Years later, I would hear it a third time. A low call that came out of the tree line behind the buildings and rolled across the yard and put a stop to everything. The wolves broke. All at once, the way a flock of birds turns. They went off the yard and into the trees, and they did not come back. Not that night and not that winter. And in the morning, the snow at the edge of the tree line was pressed with the great tracks, the notch-eared keeper's tracks. Standing where it had stood to make that sound. It had come down out of the country to the very edge of our home. It had broken the one hard rule. Almost the rule about the threshold, come as close to the house as it ever came, because the wolves were at our door, and it would not have that. I did not sleep the rest of that night. Not from fear of the wolves, from the size of what I was living next to. A thing that would drive a wolf pack off my yard and then step back into the dark and ask nothing for it. I left a whole hindquarter at the stone the next dusk. It was gone by morning. That was the only thank you I had to give, and it was not enough. And I think the keeper knew both of those things and took the meat anyway, the way you take a small gift from someone who cannot give a large one. I took the line myself in the winter of 1974, when my father's hands got too bad for the cold. He walked me to the creek one last time for the handoff. It was the only time in my life I heard him speak to the keeper out loud. He set the share on the stone. He stood a moment. He said to the empty trees that his son would keep the stone now, and that his son was a fair man, and that the fairness would hold. Then he turned and told me I was never to break the old rules. The last one hardest of all. I gave him my word. I kept it, mostly. You will see where I did not. By 1979, I had run the line alone 5 winters. That was the winter I knew for certain. It was the same one from my boyhood. The autumn before, I had lost my grandfather's folding knife somewhere on the line. Bone handle, given up for lost. In the deep of that winter, I went to leave the share, and the knife was on the stone. Laid out, clean and dry. The handle worn but whole. Carried through a whole season and given back. When I picked it up, I looked across the creek, and it was standing in the trees. Patient, watching. I saw the notch in its ear, and I understood I was being told, in the only language it had, that it remembered us. The same one. Always the same one. The arrangement was not with the country. It was with a single living mind that knew my family by the taste of the meat we left, and the shape of the men who left it. There was the winter of 1986. That was the closest I ever came to it before the end, and the only time in 50 years I ever spoke to it, the way my father had that once. I had gone to the far end later than I should have, the light already failing, because a storm had kept me off the line 2 days, and the sets needed clearing. And I was crouched at the creek setting the share on the stone when I felt it, the way you feel a person come into a room behind you, and I turned. Slow, and it was there, not across the creek in the trees where it always kept itself. On my side, 20 feet off. Close enough that I could have thrown the stone and hit it. I have never been so still in my life. It was enormous up close, far larger than I had understood from a distance, and it smelled of wet earth and something musky under that, and its eyes caught the last light, flat and dark. It looked at me, and I looked at it, and the whole world went very quiet. And I did the only thing I could think to do, which was to talk to it, low and easy, the way you talk to a horse that has spooked. I said its country was good country. I said my family had kept the stone a long time and meant to keep it a long time yet. I do not know why I said those things. They were true, and they were all I had. It listened. I will swear that to my grave. It stood and it listened to a frightened old man talk, and its face changed while I talked, not in any way I could name, but it changed. The way a person's face changes when they are being spoken to and understand they are being spoken to. And when I ran out of words, it looked at me a moment longer. Then it turned, unhurried, and it walked back across the creek and into the trees, and it was gone. I sat down in the snow after. My legs would not hold me. I sat there in the dark by the stone until the cold drove me up, and I walked home shaking, and not from the cold. I did not tell my wife where I had been so long. I told her the sets were frozen hard. That was a lie, and it was the first of many I would tell to keep the keeper's secret, and it was the smallest. The winter of 1983 was the worst any of us saw. The cold came down in October and did not lift. The game went scarce and strange. By January, we were as close to real hunger as our family ever came. I kept leaving the share even when we could barely spare it. My father's voice was in my head. You pay the rent whether you can see the landlord or not. I believe the keeper knew we were struggling. That was the winter. It gave back more than it took. Twice I came to the line and found a fresh killed caribou dragged near the trail. Far more than any share we ever left. The wolves driven off it. The meat ours. It fed us through the worst of the winter. The first caribou I found in early January. I had walked the line all day and taken nothing. And I was low in a way I had not been since I was a boy. Doing the arithmetic in my head of what we had in the cellar against how many weeks of winter were left, and the arithmetic did not come out. And there it was on the trail, near the creek. A young bull, freshly killed, the throat taken, but the body barely touched, laid across the path where I could not miss it. I stood over it a long time. I understood what it was. It was not a kill the keeper had abandoned. It was a kill the keeper had left. For us, in the same spot, the same way that we had left meat for it 1,000 times. I did not know what I felt. There is no clean word for it. To be fed by the thing you have spent your life feeding. To have the arrangement turn around in the worst hour and run the other way. I dressed that bull out on the trail with my hands going numb, and I hauled it home on the sled in 2 trips. And my wife asked no questions. And we ate through February on it. The second one came in early March, when the first was near gone, as if the keeper had been counting. As if it knew to the week. I will say it plainly. In the hardest season of my life, the Sasquatch that lived behind my home made sure my family did not starve. I have known men who would not do as much for their own blood, and it did it for a family of trappers. It had never once let itself be thanked by, asking nothing, keeping to the trees, leaving the meat and stepping back into the dark. That is the mind I want you to carry into what comes next. Not the monster, not the beast, a keeper of bargains, older and stranger, and in its own way, more faithful than any of us. So hold all of that in your mind at once. 30 years of fair dealing, a knot of grass in a tin, a ring of tracks around a sleeping child. A knife carried a season and returned. A caribou laid on the trail the year we nearly went under. That is the neighbor I had. That is the mind I was dealing with. Now the rest. In the late autumn of 1990, Emil came north to run the line with me. He was the father of that girl kept alive in the snow in 1968. She was grown and married away south by then. He had come back to be near what was left of us. He was a good hand and better company. For one season, we ran the line the way our father and grandfather must have. 2 men and a sled and the short blue days. He did not believe in the keeper. I had told him the stories our whole lives, and he had laughed at them, gentle, the way you laugh at an old man's church. He kept the arrangement because I asked, and because it cost us little, but he thought our grandfather's vanishing catch was wolverines. He thought the tracks around his own daughter were melt and refreeze. He thought the caribou of 1983 was a wolf kill we stumbled on lucky. I never argued. You cannot argue a man to seeing a thing he has decided not to see. But the country worked on him that winter, the way it works on everyone in the end. In December, he came in off the far end of the line, one evening quiet, and he sat by the stove a long while before he said anything. And then he told me he had felt watched all day, not nervous, watched. He said it was a particular feeling, that he could not shake it. That a few times he had turned around fast, expecting to catch something, and there was only the timber. I told him it was the short days getting to him. I did not tell him the truth, which was that I knew that feeling, that I had known it my whole life, That it meant the keeper was near and had taken an interest. I have gone over that evening 10,000 times. I could have told him then. I could have made him believe, or tried. I could have told him the one rule that mattered, the far end after dark rule, the do not follow rule. All of it, laid out plain, so that a man who did not believe would at least know where the lines were drawn. And I did not. I let him think it was the dark and the cold. Because 30 years of silence had made silence the only language I had left about the keeper, even with my own brother, even in my own kitchen. That is a thing I will answer for. Maybe I am answering for it now. He mentioned it twice more before January. Once he found the set sprung and the marten in it gone, taken clean, and he stood looking at it and said, half to himself, that the wolverine did not work like that. And once he said he had found tracks. He did not describe them. He said only that they were big, and that he had followed them away against his own good sense until they went into the black timber, and he lost his nerve and turned back. I should have taken him by the collar then. I said nothing. I have had 35 years to think about all the things I said nothing about. It was the middle of January when he did not come back. We had split the line that morning, him to the far end past the creek, me to the near sets. We were to meet at the cabin by dark. Dark came and he did not. I told myself he had holed up in the lean at the far end to wait out a squall. I did not go looking till first light. You do not walk that country in the black, and a part of me already knew and did not want the knowing. I found the sled the next morning, our sled, the wooden freight sled we had used all our lives. It sat in the middle of the open flat past the creek, upright, undamaged, simply left. His snowshoes were beside it. The snow all around was churned in a way I could not read. There was no blood. I have thanked God for that every day since. There was no sign of my brother at all. Only the sled and the shoes and a set of tracks going off into the black timber, far too large for any man, pressed deep. The way tracks press, when the thing making them carries a great weight. I searched 3 days. I want that on the record. I did not stand there and accept it. I walked that timber till my feet bled. I called his name till my voice was gone. I did everything a brother does. The first day I followed the great tracks myself. I want to be honest about that. I took the rifle and I went into the black timber after the thing that had taken my brother, because I did not yet understand, because a part of me still thought in the plain way a man thinks, that something had killed Emil and I was going to find it and kill it back. I followed those tracks the better part of a mile into country I had never gone into. Deep old timber where the snow lay untouched and the light came down green and dim. And then the tracks did a thing I have never been able to explain. They stopped, not petered out, stopped, as if the thing that made them had lifted off the ground. I stood in that silence with my rifle and my grief, and I understood I was somewhere I had no business being, and I turned around and I went back. And I have never gone into that part of the country again. The second and third days I searched the way you are supposed to. Grid lines off the sled. The creek banks, the lean at the far end, in case he had made it there hurt. I found nothing of him. No blood, I have said. No gear. No sign a man had struggled or fallen or been taken. Only the sled and the shoes, sitting in the open, as if he had stepped off the earth between one stride and the next. The Mounties came in on the 4th day. 2 of them out of Ross River. Good men, thorough, and out of their depth in that country, the way town men always are. We searched 2 more days together. They flew a pattern in a chartered plane and walked the creek and asked me their questions. Patted. And I answered the ones I could answer truthfully and went quiet on the rest. They wrote it down as a man lost on a trap line in deep winter. A thing that happens. A thing that has always happened in that country. They found nothing. One of them, the older one, stood with me at the sled on the last day and looked at the great tracks going off into the timber, half filled with new snow by then. He looked at them a long time, and then he looked at me, and he did not say anything, and I did not say anything. And I have always believed that man saw exactly what I saw, and chose, the way I chose, to write down the thing that would let everyone sleep. He put his hand on my shoulder before he left. He said the country keeps some men. I have thought about that too. The country keeps some men. He did not know how right he was. They told me the cold takes men, and the wolves take what the cold leaves, and that there is often nothing to find. They were kind about it. They were also wrong. I let them be wrong. The truth was not a thing I could say to a man with a notebook. For 7 nights after they left, something walked the tree line behind the house. I heard it in the small hours. The slow, heavy tread of it circling wide around the cabin, the way the tracks had circled that child in 1968. I lay in my bed with my father's voice in my head telling me, "You do not go to the far end after dark." I did not go out. And I did not know if the thing in the black was grief or threat or something keeping a vigil. I could not understand. Each night it came a little closer. That is the part I have never told and can barely set down now. The first night, the tread was far off, out past the sheds, a circling at the edge of hearing. By the third night, it was in the yard. By the fifth, I could hear it breathe. I lay in the dark with my wife asleep beside me. God rest her. She never woke through any of it. And I listened to the slow, heavy breath of the keeper standing outside the wall of my own home. And I did not go to the window because I was afraid of what I would see and more afraid of what it would mean that it had come. On the 6th night, it did a thing that broke me. It said something on the step. I heard it. The heavy tread came up to the door, closer than the threshold rule had ever let it come. And there was a pause, and a small sound of something laid down on the boards. And then the tread went away again, into the dark. I lay awake till dawn, not daring to look. And in the grey first light, I opened the door, and there on the step was a marten, freshly killed, laid out clean, a share. It had brought me a share, the way I had brought it 1,000 shares, and I understood. Standing in my doorway, with the cold pouring in, that the keeper was grieving too, in the only language it had. It was telling me it was sorry. It was telling me the arrangement still held. It was telling me something was coming that I needed to be ready for. I have never been so afraid in my life, and I have never been able to say what I was afraid of. Not the keeper hurting me. Somehow I knew it would not. I was afraid of what it was going to make me understand. On the 7th night, nothing came at all. The yard was silent. I lay awake waiting for the tread, and it did not come, and somehow that was worse than all the nights it had, because I understood the keeper was done with whatever it had been doing out there in the dark, and that the silence meant it had finished, and that in the morning I would have to go and find out what finishing meant. I understood. On the 8th day, I went to the far end at dusk. I broke every rule my father gave me. I could not stand another night of not knowing. I did not tell my wife where I was going. I took no rifle this time. I do not know why, except that I had stopped thinking of the keeper as a thing to be armed against, and had started, without quite letting myself know it, to think of it as the only one who could tell me what had become of my brother. I stood at the edge of the clearing, where the sled still sat, half buried in snow. I waited. At the very last of the light, the black timber moved, and the keeper came out of it. It was carrying something across its back. A long bundle, human-sized, wrapped over and around in the frozen canvas of a trapper's ground sheet and bound with cord, cinched tight, one end of it drooping with a weight that pulled the great shoulders down. It came out slow and deliberate and walked straight at me across the open snow. I could not move. I did not run. Every step it took, I saw more of it. The rust and charcoal hair, the wide, flat face, the bone over the eyes, and the notch. The notch torn out of the left ear, the same one. The same mind. The one my family had fed for 4 generations. It stopped at the near edge of the clearing, close enough that I heard it breathe. It bent, slow, and set the bundle down in the snow between us. It laid it down, the way you lay down something you have carried a long way and mean to give back. It did not drop it. I need you to understand that. A thing that did not care would have dropped it. This was set down, placed with 2 hands, careful, the way you set down something that matters. The way I had watched it stand my own axe upright in the frozen ground 30 years before, so it would not fall. Then it straightened, and it looked at me. We stood there in the last light, the 2 of us, with my brother between us in the snow, and I thought of all of it at once. The knot of grass in the tin. The axe stood upright. The knife carried a season and returned. The wolves broken off the yard. The caribou laid on the trail the year we starved. My father kept alive in the boughs. His granddaughter kept alive in the hollow. 40 years, 100 years of a thing in the trees, keeping faith with a family of men who could never once thank it to its face. And here it was, on the worst night of my life, keeping faith one last time, in the only way it had left. Bringing our dead home, so we would not have to wonder, so we could bury him, so we would know. I will not tell you it looked sad. I cannot know what its face meant, and I have spent 30 years refusing to lie to myself about that. I will only tell you it looked at me a long moment, and I looked back, and neither of us moved. Then it turned and walked into the black timber and was gone. It left the bundle, it left the sled. It left me standing there in the last of the light with the thing I had asked to understand. I am not going to tell you what was in the canvas. I unwrapped enough of it there in the dark to know. Then I wrapped it back. You already know. You have known since I started. My brother went to the far end of the line, and something happened out there in the deep timber. The cold, or a fall, or the country itself, the way it takes men and always has. And the keeper found what the country took. And the keeper carried it home, across its own back, for 8 days, from wherever he lay to the edge of the only clearing that would know his name. It brought our dead home to us. That is what it did. After 4 generations of fair dealing, in the only language it had, it kept faith. And here is the part I have never been able to reconcile. My father's last and hardest rule was that you never bring the dealings of the country back across the threshold. The woods are the woods. The home is the home. The keeper knew that rule. I am as certain of that as I am of anything. It had kept its side of every bargain for 100 years, and on the one day it mattered most. It broke the deepest rule we had. It crossed out of the country carrying our dead, because it understood somehow in whatever passes for its heart that a family needs to bury its own. It broke the rule to keep faith with us. I have never decided whether that is the most human thing I ever heard of or the most terrible. Maybe there is no difference. Maybe that is the whole lesson, and I have just been slow to learn it. I buried Emil myself. Up above the Nisutlin, in the frozen ground with the rest of them, I told the family the Mounties found him. That was a lie. I told the Mounties nothing at all. A young constable came back through in the spring, curious the way young men are, asking a few more questions. I could see him wondering at the edges of my story. And I understood that if I said one true word, the country would fill up with men who wanted to know. Men with rifles and lights and cameras. Men who would go into the timber after a thing that kept my family alive for 4 generations and shoot it and cage what was left and call it a discovery. So I said nothing. I have said nothing for 35 years. Choosing that silence is the only thing in my life I have never once doubted. I saw the notch one last time. The winter of 1996, far off across a frozen muskeg at the edge of our country. A shape at the tree line that stood and watched me the length of a breath and then was gone. I raised my hand to it. I do not know if it saw. I have gone back to the stone every winter since. An old man now on snowshoes he can barely manage. I leave the share at dusk the way 4 generations of us left it. It is always there in the morning, untouched. The timber never moves. But I leave it anyway. The official record says a trapper was lost in the Nisutlin country in the winter of 1991 and never recovered. That is what the paper says. It does not say he was carried home across the back of the keeper of that country and laid down at the edge of a clearing and given to his family to bury. It does not say that for 100 years a Sasquatch and a line of men dealt fair with one another in the language of meat left on a stone. It does not say that on the one night it mattered, the country's keeper understood grief better than any man with a notebook ever could. I am not asking you to believe it was mercy. I stopped needing anyone to believe me a long time ago. I am only asking you to sit a moment with the possibility that something out there in the deep timber understood death, and the bringing home of the dead better than the men who would have caged it for the knowing. That is all I have. That is the whole of it. Real or fake, you decide. In the autumn of 1956, in a rural county of the Ohio Valley, 2 sisters, aged 7 and 9, slept out of their farmhouse after midnight and ran into the woods behind it to stand between a group of armed county wildlife men and the creature those men had been called to kill. No shots were fired. 3 of the men were treated at the county hospital for injuries the incident report attributes to a bear. The girls were unhurt. The animal was never found. The younger sister is 81 now. The elder died this past spring. For 70 years, the 2 of them told no one what happened in those woods or what they had been doing out there in the first place. Not long after the funeral, the surviving sister set it down. This is her account. She asked that the county not be named. The rest is as she told it. I am the younger one. My sister has been dead since spring, and I am the last who knows this, so I will say it out loud before I go. When we were little girls, my sister and I loved a Sasquatch. We snuck out of our house to meet it more nights than I can count. When our father found out, he sent men into the woods with rifles to kill it, and we ran through the dark to stand in front of it. What happened next, I have kept inside me for 70 years. I will call it a Sasquatch, because that is what it was. We had a child's name for it that I will get to. It stood taller than any man, well over 7 feet when it drew full up. Built more like the old pictures of the first men than any ape in a zoo. Heavy bone above the eyes, a wide flat face, broad nose, no muzzle. Its hair was dark and thick, and went from deep brown at the body to near black at the tips. But it was the face I remember. The pale, flat human face of it, catching the low light at the edge of the trees, watching us the way you watch a thing you have decided not to fear. I have seen that face every night of my life. We lived at the edge of the woods, a farmhouse my grandfather built. The trees came right up to the back of the mown grass, a dark, close wall of them. Beyond that first line, the woods ran on for miles with no road in them. My sister was 2 years older. She was the brave one, always. I was the one who followed. That is how it was between us from the first day to the day she died. The first time we saw it was a summer night, when I was 7 and she was 9. We had snuck out, not to meet anything. Only because it was hot and the house was close, and my sister had it in her head. We should see the stars from the middle of the back field. We were lying in the grass when I felt her go stiff and take my hand. I sat up, at the place where the mown grass met the black wall of the trees. It was standing, just standing, watching us. Enormous and still and quiet, in a way, nothing that big has any right to be. I should have been afraid. Any sensible person will tell you a child should have screamed and run, but we were not sensible, we were children. Children have not yet learned which things they are meant to fear. My sister stood up. I grabbed at her. She shook me off. She walked 3 or 4 steps toward that wall of trees, and the giant, standing in it, and stopped, and lifted one hand. After a long moment, the Sasquatch lifted one hand back, a slow, deliberate mirror of hers, an enormous hand held up in the dark. Then it stepped back into the trees and was gone. My sister turned around with her whole face lit up. She said we had to come back, and we did. God help us, we did, for 2 whole summers. It began with food. We took things from the kitchen, an apple, a heel of bread, a strip of dried meat from the smokehouse. We left them where the grass met the trees, by a split oak we came to think of as ours. In the morning, the food would be gone, and after a while, it started leaving things back. A smooth gray stone, polished like something out of a riverbed, though the nearest river was miles off. A feather. Once, a small tight knot of grass, woven careful, the way you would braid a little girl's hair. We understood, in the wordless way children understand things, that this was a conversation, that we were being answered. That whatever lived in those woods wanted to talk to us as badly as we wanted to talk to it. We got clever about it, the way children do. My sister started leaving things in patterns, 3 stones in a row, a ring of acorns. And in the morning the pattern would be changed, answered, a 4th stone added to the 3, the ring of acorns closed where we had left it open. It was playing with us. I know how that sounds, but there is no other word for it. Something enormous and wild in those black woods was sitting down at our little split oak in the dark and moving acorns around to talk to 2 farm girls. Because we had shown it, we wanted to talk, and it wanted to talk back. And this was the only tongue we had in common. There was a night we left a whole apple, and in the morning the apple was there still, untouched, but set inside a little cage of woven twigs. Careful bent green twigs, lashed with grass into a kind of basket around it. My sister cried when she saw it. She was 9, and she did not fully know why she was crying, and neither did I, but I know now. It was the loneliness in it, the effort, the reaching. Something out there had hands enough, and mind enough, and want enough to build a small green basket in the dark for a girl's apple. Just to be answered, just to be known. We are taught our whole lives that we are alone in the top of the world, the only ones who make things, the only ones who reach. And here was proof in green twigs that we were not. A child feels a thing like that before she can say it. We gave it a name that second summer. My sister named it, of course. She called it Gentle. because that was the truest thing about it. The way something so huge could be so soft. The way it moved slow around us, as if it were afraid of frightening us, and not the other way. Gentle. I have not said that name out loud in 70 years. I can barely say it now. To us, it was not a monster and not an animal. It was a person we loved. A huge, quiet person who lived in the trees and waited for us in the dark. It let us come closer as the summer went on. Each night, a little nearer. The way you make friends with a barn cat. Until the night it let us stand right in front of it. Close enough to feel the heat coming off it. Close enough to smell it. A deep smell like wet earth and pine and something animal underneath. That was the night it touched me. My sister went first, always first. It let her put her small hand flat against its great chest. Then it turned to me. It reached down, slow, so slow. It laid one enormous hand over the whole top of my head. The way a grandfather cups a baby. Warm and heavy and unspeakably careful. It held it there a moment, and I was not afraid. I want you to hear that. A wild thing 3 times my size held my entire head in its hand in the dark, and I was not afraid. Because I knew, the way you know your own mother, that it would sooner have died than close that hand. Remember, it touched me that way. It matters later. There was a night that autumn when it showed us what it was truly for. We had lingered too long, and the woods had gone full dark. Coming back across the field, we heard the coyotes start up. Close, too close. A whole pack of them strung along the tree line between us and the house. The fear came up in me cold and total, the way it never did around Gentle. And then Gentle was simply there, between us and the sound. Huge in the dark. It made a noise I have never heard before or since. A low sound I felt in my chest more than heard. The coyotes went silent all at once and did not make another sound, and it walked us. It walked behind us, the whole way across that black field. A wall between us and the woods, until we were in the yellow light of the back porch. Then it stood at the edge of the dark and watched until we were inside. It never asked us for a thing, it only ever gave. After that night, something changed in how it was with us. It stopped keeping to the tree line. It would come out into the mown grass to meet us. Into the open, which I understand now was a great trust, because the open is where a thing like that is seen and hunted. It let us sit with it. Whole hours, some nights, the 3 of us in the grass under the summer stars, the 2 of us talking the way children talk. About school, and about our mother, and about nothing. And Gentle just there, huge and warm and listening, or seeming to listen, turning its great head to whichever of us was speaking. My sister used to lean against it. Right against its side, the way you would lean against a horse or a haystack, and it would let her, still as stone, so as not to unsettle her. I was smaller and more careful, and I did not lean, not for a long time. But there was a night near the end of that first summer when I was tired, and the grass was warm, and without deciding to, I laid my head against its arm. And I felt it go very still. And then, slow, so slow, it moved that arm. Just a little. Just enough to bring me in closer against it, out of the night air. And it held there. It did not pat me or stroke me. It only made itself into a warm place for a tired child and held still so I could rest. I fell asleep like that. My sister had to wake me to get me home. I have slept in a great many beds in 81 years, and I have never once slept so safe. We swore we would never tell. We were not fools, even as children. We knew grown people did not have room in them for a thing like Gentle. That they would call it a bear or a devil. That the secret was the only thing keeping it safe. So we kept it, the 2 of us, and the keeping of it bound us tighter than any 2 sisters have ever been bound, for the rest of her life. All 70 years of it. My sister and I could look at each other across a room full of people and know we 2 shared the largest and most impossible thing either of us would ever know. When she died this spring, I did not only lose my sister, I lost the last other person on this earth who had loved Gentle. Now that love lives in me alone. When I go, it goes with me, unless I give it to you now, which is what I am doing. It fell apart the way these things do, through carelessness and through love. It was our mother who first suspected, I think, the missing food, the grass in our hair, the way we were tired and strange in the mornings. But it was our father who followed us. On a night late in that second summer, he must have lain awake and heard us go. He came behind us through the field in the dark. and he saw what we met. I did not know he was there. I only knew that the next morning the whole world had changed. You must understand, our father was not a cruel man. I have spent 70 years making sure I understand that, because it would be easier if he had been. He was a father who followed his little girls into the dark and saw them walk up to a creature out of a nightmare and put their hands on it. Every instinct in his body told him his children were being lured to their deaths. What he did out of love and terror, which are so often the same thing, wearing different coats. That does not make him right. But he was not cruel, and I will not let you think he was. He forbade us the woods. He nailed our window shut. He told us it was a bear, a sick and dangerous bear. He said bears that lose their fear of people have to be put down, and that if we went near it again, it would kill us, and it would be our own fault. He said it over and over, until my sister stopped arguing. I thought in my child's heart that she had given up. She had not. My sister never gave up on anything in her life. She was only waiting. Those were terrible days in the house. My sister and I could not understand it. We knew, with the whole certainty of children, that Gentle would sooner die than harm us. That everything our father was saying was wrong, and we could not make him hear it. Because to make him hear it, we would have had to explain what we knew and how we knew it. And every word of that only frightened him worse. He would look at us across the supper table with a fear in his face I had never seen there. This big calm man who had never been afraid of anything. And I understand now it was the fear of a parent who believes he has nearly lost his children and does not know how to keep them. We tried once to tell him the truth. My sister did. She was braver than me, always. She sat him down and she told him plainly that the thing in the woods was Gentle, that it had saved us from the coyotes, that it left us gifts, that it loved us. And I watched my father's face while she talked, and I watched it close like a door. He did not hear a word of it as she meant it. He heard only that the animal had gotten deeper into his little girls than he had feared, that it had them believing it was a friend. And that made it more dangerous in his eyes, not less. That was the night, I think, that he decided. That was the night he made up his mind to call the men. My sister, trying to save Gentle, had signed its death warrant, and neither of us knew it. And she carried the not knowing, and then the knowing, for 70 years. We found out what he meant to do, the way children find out everything. By being small and quiet in a house where the grown people have forgotten you can hear. I was on the stairs when I heard my father on the telephone in the hall. His voice low. I heard him giving a man directions to our farm. I heard him say to come at night and to bring rifles. I heard him say to end it before it hurt one of the girls. He had called men. County wildlife men, I understood later. The kind sent for a dangerous animal. He had not told us, because he thought children forget, and he wanted it done and gone before we woke. I ran and told my sister. I have never seen a face change the way hers changed. She did not cry. She went very still and very old all at once. The way she would look decades later when the doctors told her things. She said we were going to warn it. She said Gentle did not know. She said it would just be standing there when the men came, because it had no reason in the world to run from the place where the little girls it loved always met it. And she was right. That was the horror of it. We had taught it that this one clearing in all the dark woods was safe. We had made it unafraid. And now that was going to get it killed. The men were coming the next night. We waited until the house was asleep and we went out the window. My sister had worked loose with a butter knife over 3 days, and we ran. I have never run like that before or since. 2 little girls in their nightgowns across a black field and into the woods. No lantern. Branches tearing at us. Both of us crying and neither of us stopping. Running toward the one place in the world our father had forbidden. Running toward the men with the guns instead of away from them. Because the men with the guns were between us and the one we loved. I was 7 and my legs were short and I could not keep up. I remembered the terror of falling behind in that black field. The house shrinking behind us and the woods swelling ahead. And my sister never let go of my hand, not once. She dragged me the whole way, both of us stumbling, my nightgown catching on the fence wire and tearing free, the cold dew soaking us to the knees. She kept saying we had to hurry. She kept saying please, to me, to the dark, to God, to Gentle. Please, please, as if the word itself could hold back what was coming. We could see, when we reached the tree line, headlights out on the county road. More than one set, turning up the track toward our farm. The men were early. My sister saw them too, and made a sound I have never forgotten. She pulled me into the trees, into the pitch, dark under the canopy, where we had never once gone at night. We ran on toward the split oak, by memory and by feel, our arms out in front of us, branches whipping our faces. Both of us knowing, without saying it, that we were racing those headlights. That whichever reached the clearing first, us or the men, decided whether Gentle lived. We reached the split oak and Gentle was there. Of course it was there. It came out of the trees the moment it heard us. Fast, alarmed. We had never come in a panic before, and it knew our voices, and it knew something was wrong. We tried to tell it. Oh, we tried. We pushed at its great legs. We pointed back at the house. We made every frantic sign a child can make. We said run, run, over and over. We wept and shoved at a creature that could have moved us with one finger, and it would not go. It did not understand. It looked down at us, distressed, reaching to steady us with those enormous careful hands, trying to comfort us. Thinking, I believe, that we were only frightened, not understanding the fear was for it. We had a whole language of stones and feathers and food. And we did not have the one word we needed, which was flee, so it stayed. It stayed because we were there, and it would not leave us in the dark. Then the lights came through the trees, flashlight beams, jerking and swinging, men's voices, and a sound I did not know then, and have never been able to unknow since. The sound a rifle bolt makes. The men came into the edge of the clearing, and their lights found the giant. I heard one of them say something low. I saw a long barrel come up, and my sister let go of Gentle and stepped in front of it. She put her own body between the guns and the giant. She pulled me in beside her, and we stood there, two little girls in torn nightgowns with a Sasquatch at our backs, facing down grown men with rifles. My sister screamed at them that they would have to shoot her first. Everything stopped. I have thought about that frozen moment for 70 years. I think it is the truest thing I know about people, that those men, whatever they had come to do, could not do it through two children. The barrels wavered. The men shouted at us to move, to get down, to get away from it. We did not move. They could not fire. For a few seconds, the whole clearing hung there in the swinging light. The men and the guns and the two girls and the giant. None of us able to go forward or back, and in those seconds, Gentle finally understood. Not the warning. It never understood the warning. It understood this, that the small ones it loved had put themselves in front of the danger, had turned their own soft bodies into a wall between it and the men, were willing to die where they stood so that it might live. I felt it understand. I felt the change come through the great body behind me. And I will tell you a thing I have never told anyone. It made a sound, low and broken, almost like a moan, the sound of a thing comprehending something too large for it. Then gently, so gently even then, it took my sister and me each by a shoulder in one vast hand and set us aside, out of the way, behind it, safe. And then it went at the men. I will not pretend I saw all of it clearly. It was dark and it was fast, and I was a terrified child, but I saw enough. I saw it cross the clearing in a way nothing that size should move. I saw the lights fly up into the branches and go spinning. I heard the men cry out. I heard bodies hit the ground, and I heard no gunshots. Not one. It did not give them the time. It went through those armed men like a wind through a wheat field. It laid every one of them down in the dirt, and it did not kill them. That is the part I need you to hear above everything. It could have. A thing that strong, defending itself and the children it loved, could have torn those men to pieces and been right to. And it did not. It knocked them senseless and left them breathing. Every one. I have spent my whole life believing it spared them because it had watched us love them too. Because it understood these were our people, even now, even with their guns. It was more merciful than they had come to be. Then, in the sudden quiet, with the men groaning in the dirt and the lights guttering in the grass, it turned to us. It came to where my sister and I stood, clutching each other. It lowered itself down onto its knees in front of us, so that its great flat face was level with ours. It reached out. It laid one enormous hand over my head, and one over my sister's, the way it had that first time by the oak, warm and heavy and impossibly careful. And it held us like that. I understood. This was thank you, this was goodbye. It knew, the way it had failed to know about the guns, that it could not stay now. That this place was finished for it. It was telling us in the only language we ever shared that it saw what we had done, that it knew we had offered our lives for it, that it would carry that wherever it was going, the way it once carried a smooth stone to a split oak. Its hand trembled on my head. I felt it. Then it stood, and it looked at us one last long moment with that pale, flat human face, and it turned, and it walked into the black wall of the trees, and it was gone. We never saw it again, not once in 70 years. God knows we looked. We looked every summer of our girlhood, and every summer after, in the woods of that county, and in the tree line of every other place life ever took us. Two grown women, scanning the dark edge of the trees, the way other people scan a crowd for a face they lost. We never stopped looking. I have not stopped, even now. The men gathered themselves up, out of the dirt. They were not badly hurt, only battered and shamed. They went away and did not come back. Whatever they told the county I never learned, but no one ever came hunting in those woods again. Our father, when he understood we had run out into the dark and stood in front of the guns, did not shout at us. He looked at us a long time, both of us, filthy and scratched and silent, and something in his face broke, and he never spoke of it again as long as he lived. I think he understood, too late, what kind of thing had been in his woods. I think it haunted him. I hope it did not. He was not a cruel man. My sister and I went back to the split oak for years, every summer of our childhood, then as young women. Then, when we were gray and our own children grown, we would go back to that county together and walk out to where the farm had been. We would stand at the edge of the trees, and we would leave something. An apple, a heel of bread, a smooth stone one of us had carried. In the morning it would be gone, and we would never know if that was gentle or a raccoon or only our own foolish hope. And we would tell each other it was gentle because we needed it to be, and we would go home and wait another year. She left something at those trees the last autumn of her life. I drove her out. She was too weak to drive by then. I walked her slow to the tree line. She set down a smooth gray stone she had kept in a drawer for 70 years, one of the ones it left us when we were girls. She stood there a while in the cold with her hand on my arm, and she said she hoped it would know she had come to say goodbye. She died 3 weeks later. I put a smooth stone in her hands before we closed the casket. I did not tell anyone why. I go back alone now. I am old, and it is hard, and I will not manage many more times. I leave the apple and the bread and the stone at the edge of the trees, where the mown grass used to be. The woods are quiet, nothing moves. I stand there in the cold, with 70 years pressing down on me, and I wait. I know it is likely long dead. I know that even if it lived, it has no reason to remember 2 little girls who are gone to dust and gray hair. I know all of that. And still I go, and still I leave the stone. And still, every single time, some part of me that is 7 years old lifts its hand toward the dark wall of the trees and waits to see if an enormous hand will lift itself back. I would give everything I have left to see that face one more time before I die. Just once. Just to know it lived. That it forgave us for what our own father sent to those woods. That the love was real and went both ways and outlasted everything. I do not expect it. But I will keep going to the trees until I cannot anymore. And I will keep leaving the stone. Because some loves are too large to ever fully die. And because a huge gentle thing in the dark once held my whole head in its hand and chose to be careful. And I have never in a long life been shown a greater tenderness than that, by man, nor beast, nor anything between. That is the whole of it. That is what happened to 2 little girls who loved the Sasquatch, and what our father sent to those woods, and what the thing we loved did when it could have done far worse, and did not. I have carried it 70 years. Now you carry a little of it too. Real or fake, you decide.